Cycle syncing, it's everywhere. Pinterest boards, TikTok, wellness podcasts, all promising that syncing your workouts to your menstrual cycle can lead to better energy, improved performance, and even fewer PMS symptoms. But I don't trust this. For the past 3 months, I've been putting cycle syncing to the test. First, I've been following the routines I see all over social media and Pinterest. And then the last month, switching to a more science-based program by people like Dr. Stacy Sims. In this video, I'm going to break down how I felt in each phase, if it worked, if it didn't, and if I think this trend is worth your time. Before we dive in, let's explain what is cycle syncing. The concept is pretty simple. Your hormones fluctuate throughout the month, so shouldn't your workouts also fluctuate throughout the month based on your cycle? So let's break down your cycle. First, day 1 through 5, your menstrual phase, aka when you're bleeding. 2, your follicular phase. This is day 1 to 14. This phase, changing hormone levels causing the lining of your uterus to thicken and follicles to grow on the surface of the ovaries. Usually only one follicle will mature into an egg. Ovulation, around day 14 to 17, aka just right when your follicular phase ends. A mature egg is released from an ovary, and yes, this is the time you're most likely to get pregnant. And last phase, the luteal, day 18 to 28. Dun dun dun. After ovulation, the uterus lining continues to thicken in preparation for pregnancy. And when there is no pregnancy, out comes the waterfall! And repeat. And repeat, and repeat, and repeat, and repeat. So for the first month, I decided let's see what's all over Pinterest. There's kind of a common occurrence I've seen over the apps, over Pinterest, the most common things of how you should base your workouts based on your menstrual cycle. And actually, I think the science says this is completely opposite, but let's dive into what I did the first 2 months to see if it's true. Cycle syncing according to Pinterest. During your period, it's all about low impact, walking, stretching. In your follicular phase, you're doing moderate intensity, cardio and HIIT exercises. The few days of your ovulation is when you do high intensity, HIIT and weights. Then your luteal phase is when you go back to low intensity, Pilates, yoga, weight training. First month of cycle syncing, I was in my weightlifting challenge. If you guys saw it, I did 30 days of weightlifting. It was more rebuilding the habit. And for me, the one thing is there's no real miracle between week 4 of your cycle doing Pilates and yoga. It's more just doing low intensity things. And that can be through yoga or Pilates, or it can be lowering your weights, lowering the volume. But for me, because I was trying to build that habit of weights, it kind of worked out nicely that it was the first week of this weight training. And you know what? There's nothing more I wanted to do than just throw on a baggy t-shirt and go through the motions. So I went there, just tried to build the habit. It was an easier workout. I still got to the gym, still weightlifted. I just didn't weightlift at 100% capacity because I was just trying to build a habit, and also I was in PMS time. During your menstrual phase, you want light activities. Think yoga, walks. And I won't lie, it felt nice. It felt nice not forcing it when, I'm literally bleeding. But at the same time, something about this felt off, which I found out later in month 3. 2, your follicular phase. This is when you do your HIIT training, high volume, sprint training, weight training, just intense things. Ovulation, according to Pinterest, all this is when you do your heavy strength training. And then your luteal phase is when you start to dial it back a little bit. You do your Pilates, your yoga, walks, and lighter weights. And I did it for the first 2 months, and it felt nice. It's also winter time, Christmas. It was kind of nice to time it. I liked it, but also there's times I'm like, I would have liked my more restful times in my cycle to be around Christmas. It kind of ended up working that way. And it kind of ended up working out when I was sick, which we'll talk about in a second. I tried to set up a chest vertebra in this gym and I can't. But I also found this kind of restrictive. Like some days I woke up and I got energy. I'm on my period, but I could definitely crush some PRs. I'm just a little moody, but there was times where I was telling me to push myself and I wasn't feeling the best.
Tip of why you should sometimes film your workouts. I was just reviewing my footage of my deadlift form. My back was not engaged at all. I was like, oh no.
But the pros of this was I did feel more in tune with my body because I was just constantly checking in. And the cons, the workouts weren't always aligned with how I felt. So I'm being in tune with my body, but I'm also not fully. So I like the mindfulness of it, but also it felt restrictive and kind of counterintuitive to my body. For example, I got sick. Guys, I got a cold confession. I got really sick in January. I had 3 different kinds of infections. Eyes, lungs, finger. It wasn't cute. I think I have pink eye. So yeah, I just had a month of PMS. The whole month was PMS. I was so girl the entire time. So this challenge I've actually planning to do for 120 days, not the 30 days, because January is a complete write-off. But the whole point of the cycle syncing is to listen to your body, and my body needed rest because it was literally unwell. These things sound great in theory, but guess what? Life doesn't always work like that. And so there was a couple weeks where this was kind of just thrown off, and I was just in my permanent yoga Pilates phase, just a lot of hot girl walks. And guess what? I was in my follicular phase. I should have been pushing myself, but guess what? No. And before we dive into the science-based one, which I reached into for more in month 3, we got to also talk about another problem, the 28-day cycle. Sounds great in theory, not for this girl. I don't have a perfectly regular cycle. I never have since I was born. The only time I had it, since I hit puberty, because yeah, you don't have a period when you're born. The only time ever was I was on oral contraceptive, which I'm not on right now. And that was the only time I had like a perfectly scheduled period. So maybe if you're on birth control and you can perfectly time it, but for a lot of us, there's like a lot of variance. Like I have a rough idea. So the more I'm doing this, the more I'm liking the idea of like checking in with myself, being mindful of like, this is what I'm going to be capable of this part of my cycle, but also not holding so much, like putting off workouts that I definitely had the energy for. On the flip side, like not knowing exactly where it's going to fit perfectly. So it's kind of hard to time rest days, deload times, workout programs. So yeah, problems. So let's see what happens though when I switch to a science-based program. Cycle syncing according to science. During your menstrual phase is your power phase. Think strength and speed. Weights 2 to 3 times a week, compound movements, and cardio HIIT training. The first few days, yes, you might have some cramps, so be mindful of that. Your follicular phase, this is the highest intensity. This is when you can push your body to fatigue. Weights 2 to 3 times a week. Some people do 4. Cardio, this is when you can really get that HIIT anaerobic workouts. Then ovulation. Right after it is you want to take a little bit of a step back and more into the aerobic. So cardio, more steady state versus HIIT. Weights, focus more on form and full body versus pushing yourself to complete failure. Then your luteal phase, this is a great time to do a deload week, a lower intensity. You don't necessarily have to do Pilates and yoga. It can be simply not doing max out sprints, not doing max out weights. If you have deload in your program, this is a great time to plan it. Specifically, I use the advice from Dr. Stacy Sims, who specializes in female physiology and performance. Her take, don't baby yourself during your period. In fact, she suggests pushing yourself harder here, while being smart with nutrition to offset cramps and fatigue. This is mind-blowing. All of these things online are saying, during your period, relax, all this. I'm like, no. None of this baby stuff. No. This is when we hit PR. The ideal situation. As a female athlete growing up, I was petrified because I played basketball and volleyball, and nothing like tiny little shorts and a swimsuit in the water to fear yourself getting your period. I was like, please don't. But actually, I'd be my fastest during then, and mostly I could hit my PR. So you should actually pray for it, because that's when your hormones are pumping. So like all these cycle things are literally counterintuitive to women's cycles. It's kind of crazy. So here's what the science actually says. Your menstrual phase, so day 1 to 5 when you're bleeding. This is when you should be doing sprints and weight training. And then yes, you're gonna have some cramps and stuff like that, but the best thing you can actually do, according to Dr. Stacey Sims, is just monitoring your nutrition and hydration. And those are actually probably the things that are causing you the discomfort during your menstrual cycle. Because once again, PMS is PMS. Premenstrual syndrome. The problems come before your period, not during your period. I know for me, I think sometimes when I have problems during my period, it's because it's how I ate when I was PMSing, and then I'm reaping the results of that. So anyways, the pump today, it could be my dinner last night, but let's talk about PMS. Let's work our way to PMS. So second, your follicular phase. This is when, yes, you have the most energy. This is when you can push yourself, but this is not day 6 to 14. This is day 1 to 14. So if you're gonna plan heavy workouts, your sprints, you're going for PRs, if you can plan that, this is when to push yourself. Starting your period, time to push yourself and try and adjust your sleeping and nutrition so you feel your best. And I think that's a great thing us as women we can do, is become in tune. How do I need to personally eat and hydrate myself so I feel best during my period when I have all these hormones? And then we can be like superwoman then. Next up, after follicular phase, your ovulation. And this is where to push yourself. The last bit, this is when you are really primed to go big. Think power moves, heavy sprints. So once again, these are your ramping up, your biggest workouts, all the way up to ovulation, PRing. This is when happens, and you should be very happy with that. So sometimes the cycle syncings online were a little aligned with that. Moral of the story, ovulation is just, we are just primed for everything, literally everything then. But then after ovulation comes luteal. I feel like every evil person in a movie is called like Luther or something. It seems appropriate. Luth. What does Dr. Stacey Sims say? This is when to pull back. And this doesn't necessarily mean just yoga or Pilates. Now, I'm going to give a tip. I like yoga and Pilates. So sometimes I switch a weight training workout for a yoga or Pilates class when I'm in this. And that's what I did here. But a lot of the times I didn't want to switch up my routine. I'm rebuilding this routine. It's the new year. I'm trying to get in the habit of weight training. Instead of just throwing caution to the wind and getting out of the habit, just decrease the volume. Maybe don't lift as heavy. Don't run as intensely. Instead of going for a 5-kilometer PR, go for a 2-3 kilometer slow run. Still get out there. Still get to the gym and lift weights. But if you curled 25 pounds last week, maybe just curl the 15s or a few less reps. So think of it less as like you have to do Pilates and yoga here, and just like lower the intensity. It doesn't mean you have to build a whole new routine. But at the same time, if that's what speaks to you and you're someone like me who actually does like Pilates and yoga, dip into that. So when I'm in Vancouver in a Pilates and yoga class and I know my period's coming in about a week, I'm like, you know what, throw on a little extra yoga class here. It's going to feel good. But when I'm in Sundsville and there's no fitness classes, I'm like, just go to the gym and do a bit more stretching, a bit more mobility, a little less deadlifting. And I will say in month 3, this plan felt way more empowering. It was less about protecting my body and more about understanding when to push and when to pull back. So I don't know, I felt like I was like less babying, and there's times to be gentle, but there's also times to be like empowered. And I don't know, the original cycle syncing just felt like I was just this like fragile little thing all the time. And like, you get this little window to push yourself. And also I don't like the idea of like, it's kind of symbolizing that women can only weight train like once a month, maybe 2. Like, no, we can weight train multiple times a month. And I just don't like this whole idea of like, there's a lot of underlining things. Like we think we're over the like not promoting just thin as in and like don't care about being bulky. But then we hear cortisol face and, HIIT classes make you gain weight. Like there's still a lot of that. We just don't realize what it is because it's not as obvious. And I think a lot of these things like cyclosyncing, hormone balancing. And yes, there's going to be times where we push yourself, and that's a great thing about being a woman, but let's empower when we can push ourselves, and there's times we should feel empowered. And yeah, there is times where we can't push ourselves as much, so let's take a step back, but not like treating it like, be so careful. We can literally produce humans. We can do so much. And I guess that's kind of what I didn't like about the first 2 months of cycle syncing. It was like, according to this, I can only sprint like once a month. That seems not good, especially when weight training is one of the most important things women can do for longevity, for diminishing bone density that will go down as we get older. Like weight training is so important. So these cycle syncing workouts saying we should only weight train once or twice a month is crazy, especially when one of the things sometimes that helps PMS is movement. So is cycle syncing actually legit? Studies show mixed results. Some research supports training based on hormone fluctuations, while others say individual variability matters more, meaning what works for me might not work for you. And I see it everywhere on the internet. I see so many different opinions because we're all different. Some people I've seen online show improved energy and fewer PMS symptoms, while others felt it was too rigid or simply didn't notice a huge difference. The takeaway, listen to your body. So here are my main problems with cycle syncing. First, cycles aren't always 28 days. So it's kind of hard to perfectly time it when you don't know exactly how much of your cycle is. And I don't know about you guys, but I like to think of my workouts like Monday through Sunday. Like I plan like that. I don't really plan in 28 days. It's kind of awkward because not every month is February. 2, the placebo effect. I do think some of this is a little placebo. Like our Oura rings. I'm guilty. My Oura ring tells me I had a bad sleep, so I have no energy. Had I not looked at my Oura ring, I would have been fine. And so sometimes we tell ourselves we have no energy because we're on our period, when in actuality, we should have a bit of energy. So sometimes I think we placebo affect ourselves, myself included. I love a scapegoat. The third problem is most of the advice you see online is wrong. It's kind of screwed it up. Is during your menstrual cycle is when to push yourself. Follicular phase, push yourself even more. And ovulation phase, really push yourself. And then lay down the volume a little bit when you're in your luteal phase. But that doesn't mean you have to do yoga and Pilates. It just could mean step back on weights a little. Because the other big problems I see in cycle syncing is 1, not enough strength training. Because according to these, you're only strength training 1 to 2 weeks a month. And I think the biggest thing is there's just confusion, is PMS versus menstrual cycle. Your PMS, a lot of those symptoms are before your period, pre-menstrual symptoms versus when you're on your period. It sucks. And sometimes it's going to be individual, but I notice for me, most of the negative symptoms I have when I'm on my period are to do with what I did PMSing, like not drinking enough water and then everything being backed up. And lastly, let's also talk about when PMS is not PMS, it's actually PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. This is something I just wanted to educate you on. I'm not a doctor. I can't prescribe anything. I just think there needs to be more education. And I know for me, I've had diagnoses in the past, and I remember hearing other people and trying to do, cycle syncing and doing stuff like that to do better for me. And I didn't realize I actually had a clinical diagnosis I needed. And with PMDD, it's really severe. Like, the lack of better terms, it's just you're gonna have way more severe PMS symptoms. Like, you almost go into a pure depressive episode when you're PMSing, and that is what truly happens to your body. So if you just find like PMS the week before your period is like, it's not like, oh, I'm just a little moody, a little lack of energy, I'm a little sad or a little cranky. Like, you're like, no, I feel bipolar, like, lack of better terms. Like, you're like, I am depressed, I cannot work, I cannot work out. Consider going to doctor and see if you might have PMDD. So that's why I was like, all these things are working, they sound great, but if you just have another layer to deal with, be gentle with yourself and realize you could be dealing with that. So I just wanted to sprinkle that in because I've heard that in some comments in the past of like something I want to address, and because you might be doing all this and be like, this sounds great, Keltie, but like, I can't get out of bed in my luteal phase. Something to look into. But if you can get out of bed and you're just a little chocolate hungry and a little whiny like myself, just be gentle.
I'm swollen, bloated, PMSy. My period is coming any day today. Zero motivation to push myself right now. So I committed to gym. I'm going to do a lot of mobility work. So lightweight, some yoga, but just good old mobility. Deload week. I'm also going to do some weights, but like through the motion, not intense.
And just when I didn't think my luteal phase could get any worse, I thought, why not throw some jet lag into the mix? Because I flew from Sweden back to Canada during this time. And a very important thing to neglect the PMS symptoms is hydration. Now, specifically because Dr. Stacey Sims is quoted saying the luteal phase of your cycle, especially when hormones are the highest in the week or so before your period, your core temperature is slightly elevated. You start to sweat later after starting exercises, and your blood plasma volume is reduced by up to 8%. And this is why it's so important, specifically when flying during your luteal phase, to stay hydrated, and not just hydration, but if you're someone who's very active like myself, also supplementing with electrolytes. So it's really important to hydrate in that part of your cycle. And of course, my favorite electrolyte is Element because of its science-based ratio of 1,000 milligrams sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. It tastes delicious. It's so convenient. Instead of buying an overpriced electrolyte drink in the airport, I could just have my little package that I always have in my purse with me, throw it in my water bottle, and boom, I'm ready to go. For me, it helps neglect some of the negative side effects from traveling, muscle cramps, headaches. I love Element for the taste, the convenience, and it's trusted by professionals in the NFL, NHL, NBA to help properly hydrate even the highest of athletes. And of course, I'm not going to talk about it and not give you guys a code. If you go to drinkelement.com/Keltie, you'll get one of the sample packets with your purchase. This is a great way to try all 8 flavors or share with a salty friend. Once again, that's drinkelement.com/Keltie. Thank you, Element, for sponsoring this video. Okay, I'm back from Sweden, and the jet lag, I was worried it was kind of going to throw me off from this, so I'm trying to listen to my body. My period's coming. It's a bit of a whirlwind. I feel like I'm in a fever dream, but this weekend, I'm doing a 100 push-up a day challenge with my family because my mom somehow convinced us all to do it for our mental health. So I've been doing that, and then I did a workout class, a pretty intense one, like athletic training with my best friends this weekend. And yeah, I'm feeling good. I shockingly had energy, even though I just like didn't feel great. But that's such a funny thing. And it's a reminder, and I feel really blessed that I get this opportunity. So I want to remind you guys, when I'm on my period, I feel like the Michelin Man. I feel everyone can see it in my face, in my gut. I feel swollen. I'm just like, ugh, like I just feel the gross. And then I look at myself on the video. I'm like, you look the same as every other day. Like, you look at this video footage of me. Do I look any different? No. So it's a reminder of like, there's this specific term, I forget it, but it's in essence like menstrual body dysmorphia that happens. And it is true, we do get bloated, but just it's a nice reminder that it's a little in our head of like how we look. We all know that feeling. So here's just that reminder, because I did not feel hot this weekend, but I worked out well. I'm also taking creatine, so that's helping. So my results, energy levels, when I did the Dr. Stacey Sims, I did like that my energy levels were aligned. The first 2 months, it didn't feel aligned, and then it made sense once I looked into the more science. Strength and performance, I liked it because it scheduled my workouts naturally to push myself harder when I had the most energy, which results in better workouts. PMS symptoms, it didn't change my PMS symptoms, but it did make me mindful of being like, Keltie, you're about to go into your menstrual cycle. In order to have it enjoyable and get the most out of your workouts, you kind of have to be mindful of PMS. So for me, it's making sure to eat enough, because sometimes I have a tendency to lose my appetite when I'm in my luteal phase and I don't get enough fiber or water, and then I'm backed up for my PMS, and that's what the bloating is. So that's not necessarily going to be for you, but just realize what works. And like, I know I'm really hungry during my menstrual cycle because I sometimes undereat a little during my luteal phase, because one of my symptoms is just like a lack of hunger. So I just make sure to eat more in my luteal phase, a little past hunger, and then I feel energized come my menstrual cycle, and not like I just need to eat buckets of ice cream. I think my biggest annoyance with cycle syncing, after reflecting a little bit, specifically the Pinterest one, is it's telling women how they should feel during their menstrual cycles. And there's obviously a lot of similarities because we have a lot of similar hormones, but every single person's going to be different. Even when I gave my example of like, I was like, I lose my appetite a bit in my luteal phase, and then it ramps up during my menstrual phase. That could be the opposite for a lot of people. An example is when I talked about like during your menstrual phase, the first couple of days, like push yourself, you have all this energy, and a lot of you are like, I have so much cramps. That's also something to reflect on. Just know that about yourself. During the first few days of your period, you have really bad cramps. So it's probably not maybe the best time to do your most explosive workouts, because you know you can't give 100%. Also though, experiments, sometimes doing really active things can help reduce some of the symptoms being active. I think the most important thing at the end of the day is to track your cycle, track how you personally react, and adjust your workouts accordingly to the symptoms that you get due to your menstrual cycle. That is, I don't think anyone in terms of science, Dr. Stacey Sims, anyone like that would disagree with that. It really comes down to tracking and figuring out what works for you, being mindful of the science, and so you know the hormones. But just because something on Pinterest says you should be doing Pilates when you feel like doing weights, the most scientific thing we can do is a study on ourselves. And overall thoughts, I loved it. I loved it with being mindful. I think being intuitive is very important, whether it be your workouts, your diet, anything, especially women. Like, we naturally have to be so intuitive because we have so much to deal with mood-wise and hormone changing-wise. And until there comes the day that our watches tell us exactly where we are, and the Oura rings are pretty good, but tell you exactly, perfectly, the best thing we can go off is ourselves, and just kind of be mindful of this. But once again, look what happened in the first month of this is I listened to myself, but I also kind of ignored myself because it was like, oh, well, this is what it says. So I was listening to myself, but I was also taking advice from others instead of truly being intuitive with myself. So going forward, I'm not really going to fully follow this. Like, I'm not going to be hardcore about it because I think that defeats the purpose. I think it's just one of those things to be a bit more mindful of, like, how I'm going to treat my PMS, to actually push myself a little bit during this first bit of my cycle. And then, like, yeah, if, I just had my period, maybe mindfully look, being like, you know what, I haven't gone for a 15K run in a bit. It's my period. Ovulation will be in about 15 days. Plan that. Like, that's kind of how you can kind of be mindful of, like, oh, I got a big run. I got to do it sometime this month. I'll plug it in around there. Or try to have a baby. Or avoid if you're not trying to have a baby. But also, don't be too strict about this. That would be my advice, because this is great. But once again, our cycles aren't perfectly 28 days. So I think sometimes we have so much to track. We have finances. Some people track their calories. We got to track our workouts, our water. There's so much tracking. So I think it's something to be a bit more intuitive. But if you've done cycle syncing, comment down below. We'd love to hear your results, because that's one of my favorite things about this channel is, like, the comment section is also other people's opinions, almost like a review section of others. So this is just my own experience, and you'll hear some other people's experience down in the comments. But most important thing for oxytocin to release those feel-good hormones is go pet a dog. Have a great day. Go pet a dog. Love you guys. Bye.